Good evening. Ready? Good evening. On behalf of the Emerging 100 of Metro Atlanta, the 100 Black Men South Metro Atlanta, and the National Coalition of Black Metro Atlanta Chapter and MECCA Chapter, we would like to thank you for tuning in. My name is Jared C. Fields. I am the Vice President of the Emerging 100 South Metro Atlanta Chapter. Tonight, we will be having a candid discussion about making the census make sense. We titled it Making the Census Make Sense so that these prestigious panelists can go in depth and explain the reality and explain the importance of doing the census. Tonight, we have a special guest moderator. Her name is Shay McCray. She is host of the Shay McCray Show on FUBU Radio /iHeart. Shay McCray hails from Brooklyn, New York. She started having an acting career in high school. So she started out acting, but it led to later roles in things such as Greenleaf and being Mary Jane along with the Hills. Shay McCray is a brand ambassador, a media personality, and a radio host. To give you some more in-depth details about Shay McCray, here she is now. I'd like to bring to you our moderator, Shay McCray.
Hello. Hello, everyone. How you doing? Can everybody see me? Just want to make sure. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm not sure. Hey, I like to see people. Listen, I'm not your no personality host. We're gonna have some fun on this thing. You can put your head down. If you don't have none, just pat your head. It's all good, all right? But that was for you. That was for you, Alex. So I want to introduce myself. My name is Shay McCray, and yes, he is right. I am a native of Brooklyn, New York. So a way of Hartford, Connecticut, and here I am in Atlanta, Georgia. And I love it here. I've been here about 10 years. Now, I am the host on FUBU Radio via iHeartRadio.com and so forth, but I just walked into a new role. I am on primetime now, and the show is called The Takeover with Shay McCray, and it's from 4 to 6 Monday through Friday, every day. So if you have not yet, download that FUBU Radio app. If you have iHeart Radio.com, that'll do as well. I'm here on behalf of course, the 100. Excuse me. On behalf of the Emerging 100 South Metro Atlanta Natural Coalition of 100 Women Inc., Metro Atlanta Chapter, MECCA Chapter, and the 100 Black Men in South Atlanta Inc. And because they have joined force to help us, myself as well, yes, I'm going to tell the truth, to help us understand why the census makes sense and how it affects our lives and community and our career. Now, I will tell you this. I know I told Jay that I was going to elaborate on this because I am one of the ones, and I'm guilty. Okay, I'm here. I didn't believe in the census, and I kind of still don't, but I'm here. I'm here to get knowledge, information, and if you can convince me, I'm pretty sure we can convince everyone else that is watching. So that's why we're here, okay? So I remember when I was asked to moderate, I said to my brother, I said, I feel bad. I just accepted a moderation job, but I don't even believe in it. And he said, use it, do what you got to do, and you explain it. So I'm here to tell my truth, and I hope you can convince me too, okay? So we're gonna get started because I'm pretty sure everybody is very eager to know why they should fill out that form that was stuck in my door as well yesterday. and so we can make sure that we're doing the right thing, and if it's to help us, that's what we need to do. And I understand the concept, but we're here to get more insight of it. So first, I would like to welcome everyone that's here on the panel, okay? First, I would like to welcome Odie Donald. Now, if I butcher your name, Forgive me. I did try to practice it, but just correct yourself as you come on, okay? Odie Donald, city manager of South Fulton, okay? Brad Johnson, town manager of in Florida. I want to welcome Alex Lima from the U.S. Census Bureau. Oh boy, here we go now. Ed Reed, director of the Fair. Welcome Langston Longley, school principal. Ladre Gilbert, attorney Ladre Gilbert of Gilbert Justice Center. And last but not least, Mr. Philip Singleton of Singleton Consulting. If we had class, I would love everybody just to clap and welcome our wonderful, wonderful panelists. And one thing I would say, I am so excited as I was promoting this on my show that every last one of you are Black men. I appreciate it. All right. All right, so we're gonna get started. I know you guys are excited to answer the questions that we have here for you guys because we're eager to know. All right. Now I'm gonna ask that everyone please keep their answers to a 3 to 5 minute minimum. With that being said, when I ask you your question, I have a question for everyone, okay? When I ask you your question, I would like for you to do a small introduction of yourself, answer the question, and I probably have one more question for you. And that last question would be, how does the census affect your career? All right? So we ready? Who wants to go first? But you have no choice. So here we go. Now, like I said, I'm your different host, okay? We're gonna be sitting down like we're on the couch, put your collar down, your hair down, whatever, because you got to get down to our level so we can make sure that we understand the reason why we're actually filling out these census, okay? So talk to us on our level and we're gonna have a good time. Y'all with me? Look, just stay with me, look, or do high fives in the chat or whatever, however. Okay? All right, so question number 1. This one is for Mr. Alex Lima from the U.S. Census Bureau. What is the census, and can you briefly explain how it benefits us to be counted?
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to
Yes.
explain what the census is in the English that we speak out here in the community. So the census essentially is an inventory. We're taking an inventory of America. We're taking an inventory of Georgia. We're taking an inventory of Fulton County or whatever county you live in. The city of East Point, the city of Atlanta, the city of Hapeville, whatever city you live in, there's an inventory that's being taken. Based on this inventory, there's money that comes for the amount of people that show up on paper. So I'll use the sneaker analogy. Summertime's coming. You need a pair of white sneakers, but not just one, not just two. We usually need about 2 or 3 or 4 pair because they get dirty, they get scuffed. So we need to make sure we're crisp and clean when we're outside. Now, if you go in your closet and you've only got one sneaker, then that means you need to go out, you need to buy a couple more pairs. But if you go into your closet and you see that there's a different number, then you're not going to go buy anymore, right? Because you feel you're covered. Well, the census is kind of the reverse, where if we don't count ourselves, if we don't show up on paper, then we don't get the money from the government to fund the resources that we use daily. So these are resources like schools, hospitals, fire stations, things you drive on the roads. Census data is used to make sure these potholes that do or don't get filled in Atlanta get filled. If you've driven to Camp Creek Marketplace, now it's a different experience. It's like it's a whole new world getting over there. That whole construction project was funded by data that was gathered by the census. So we don't believe or think or know that the census affects us daily, but it affects us daily. So that's a part of it. The other part is representation. And when I say representation, I mean political representation. So if we don't show up on paper, then we don't get a representative from our community. Because what happens is they say, well, there's only 25 of you. So why do you need a full-blown representative? We're gonna connect you with another representative. Now, this representative may not live in our community. They may live in another part of the city or another part of town where their needs are different than our needs. So the census, the decennial census, because this one only comes around once every 10 years, and that's what's important about this one. is if you don't answer right now, you don't get this opportunity for another decade. So it's not even important. It's beyond important. It's almost life and death important that you count yourself. Because if you don't show up on paper, you just don't exist. You just don't show up. And so then the money doesn't come, the political representation doesn't show up. So it's vital. I don't know. I think I got your head nodding, Shay. I think you felt me on that. I think I'm
Uh,
a believer.
open discussion, because my belief, if we're needing to get the count, wouldn't we be able to look for that in the program, the special programs that they're signing up for within the community? There's a way to get the count if they're signing up for these needy programs, right?
Well, the census is it's not the end all be all. It's the beginning point. And so by getting the count from the beginning, they can say, okay, there's this many people. So let's set aside this money over here for these programs. It sadly doesn't work the way you suggest. It makes sense, but as we all know now that we're adults, things that make sense don't always happen. So we have to show up on paper first, because if we don't show up on paper, what happens is then you get cutbacks. So your grandma who's on Medicaid, that's a federally funded program that census data ensures gets funded. She might get her Medicaid cut. The folks who are struggling right now to feed their family, who are on SNAP EBT, who are getting X amount of dollars, if the numbers don't come in, those dollars could be reduced. So now folks, they're not eating like they used to. So I don't disagree with you that your method and your idea makes sense. As long as this country's been founded, they've done it this way. So currently, they're going to do it this way, where every 10 years, they're going to take account.
Could you please explain to us how the census affect your career?
So census data is used to bring in businesses into your community. So from a career standpoint, let's say there is not enough of a count, big companies won't come and open up a office building in your space, or they won't open up a warehouse. Based on the census data is where money is transferred from a business standpoint in terms of deals inked. Do we need to bring in special housing, or do we need to bring in warehouses, or do we need to bring in restaurants? All of that affects the opportunity for you to advance yourself in a career, especially if you're living in the community that businesses are coming to. The average travel distance or time for a person here in the southern part of Metro Atlanta is about 30 minutes. Yet we're next to the busiest airport in the world, and we have tons of space. There's tons of warehouses. However, our people are having to get on the MARTA train and go north, because that's where all the businesses are, right? That's where we all go to spend our money, right? Because that's where the city's real pretty. That's where the lights are on. That's where the streets are paved. That's where the parks are clean. Well, they're coming in at 75% on their census. We're coming in at 42% of our census. That makes a big difference. So it definitely affects and impacts your opportunity to advance yourself in a career.
Right. So next up, we have Mr. Ed. I'm sorry, did you guys hear me? You hear me now? I just wanted to say thank you, Alex Lima, for that. We appreciate it. The next question I have is for Mr. Ed Reed from Fear Count. All right. So the question is, what benefits have community received from the census in the past? And can you provide a concrete example?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shay, for the question. Thank you to the Emerging Hunger for putting on this fantastic panel. I think it's very important that we get this message out, particularly at a point right now where we have an urgency to get counted ahead of the September 30th deadline. But great question. And there, I'm going to answer it in, I think, 3 different ways. So, Alex kind of gave us a really good foundation to talk a little bit about the backdrop of why the census is important. But we also know that the census dictates, over $1.5 trillion on an annual basis to cities, counties, towns, states across the nation. When we talk about that that stream of funding, we talk about a representation of more than 300 federal programs. And so Alex talked about a few of them: Medicaid, Medicare. We talk about Head Start funding, pre-K funding. We talk about the ability to provide school lunch programs in our schools. We talk about the infrastructure, the roads, the transportation, disaster relief. One of the things that we found that has been a very effective message, and it really resonates with folks, is the connection to the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So a lot of the resources that come from CDC, come from FEMA, that are coming from, through the process of the CARES Act that came out in the first stimulus bill and package that we have from the federal government. A lot of the monies that was based in those bills were based on data that derived from the census. The federal government's ability to provide funding and monies for the small businesses that needed the money to get back on track. They looked at the census and where the populations were and used that information to drive that. As we get onto a road to recovery from COVID-19, and it's going to be vitally important that our communities are fairly and accurately counted. We know that our communities are often misrepresented. They're also disenfranchised, marginalized, as is. And you couple that with a global pandemic on top of that, just imagine kind of how our communities are being devastated. One of the only ways to regroup from that is going to be getting the resources that we need from the state, from the federal governments. And the only way to do that is if we are heard and seen through the 2020 census. And so that's the first reason I would give. The second would be in 2010, the last time we had a census, Georgia picked up 2 congressional seats. So we went from having a smaller amount in Congress at the federal level representatives to having 2 additional seats. So we get additional seats at the table in terms of political representation. So it's vitally important that we are fairly and accurately accounted for the process of reapportionment, so that when these political lines are drawn, we don't get left out of that equation, and that we have the right representation and we have a seat at the table. The third I would talk about is economic development, and that's one of the reasons that's often left out of the conversation. Because when businesses are looking to relocate to a certain area, or they're looking to start up, they're looking at census data to drive their decisions, right? Fair Count, the organization that I'm proud to be the program director at, we work across the state of Georgia, but also in many other states across the nation. And we're focused right now only on the census as of right now. What we found in some communities is that based on the 2010 census, they picked up a grocery store. We had some of the very rural areas that were living in food deserts, didn't have a grocery store. Because they were fairly and accurately counted in the 2010 census, businesses started to see that the population was actually trending up. It was a diverse population. It was a younger population, and they were able to draw a national food chain to actually put up shop in that town. And as you can imagine, that's a game changer from the ability to provide food, but also to provide jobs for a community like that. So I'd answer that with those 3 bullet points to say, if you couple all of those things together, that is a lot of power through money, through political representation, that is vitally important for our communities.
Am I on? Well, I can say a lot to you, Mr. Reed, when they know that there's not a grocery store there based on zoning, but we could get into that later, Now, I have a question for you as well. Please explain how the census affects your career personally.
Yeah, well, I mean, like Alex, this is kind of what I live and breathe on a daily basis in this position. So it is something that drives my everyday work. And I will say I've had the pleasure of working in a number of different professions and fields throughout my career. And this is some of the most impactful work that I've done is organizing and working in communities that have, like I said, been oftentimes left out of the conversation or left out of the equation, particularly as it relates to Black men. And you see my shirt says Black Men Count. That is an initiative that Fair Count has to ensure that Black men are counted in the census. And you know, I think the biggest joy and passion for me is leading that effort at Fair Count in Georgia, but also across the nation every day. And so waking up to go to work to do that kind of work, even in the global pandemic, is still exciting to me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Reed. I really appreciate your feedback. Once again, I just believe that, and they believe as well, getting our voices heard, they feel like it doesn't matter. So that's why we're here, to let them know that it does matter, right? Black men voices, right? Just nod your head, look. So, all right, let's move right along. And please, guys, don't forget to introduce yourself. Let us know what it is that you actually do. You know, just elaborate a little bit more on what it you do, okay? All right, so the next question is for our principal, Mr. Langston Longley. I'm sorry, excuse me for that. I'm sorry, our city of South Fulton manager, Mr. Odie Donald, okay? As a city manager, how bad would the impact be for the citizens of your local municipalities that chooses not to participate in the census?
Yeah, man, the census is probably one of the most important tools to ensure that local municipalities receive the type of resources that go beyond our millage rate or, you know, our residential taxes that we receive from our residents. So if people don't really get involved in the census and there's not an accurate count, things like the Head Start program, school lunch, plans for highways, support for firefighters, things that prevent child abuse. So the support for the Department of Family and Children Services, even housing for older adults, you know, you don't get the correct amount of funding from the federal government, and it makes a larger strain on your local city resources. So, you know, not having a fair count is really a big part of why Black and brown communities are often left behind. And so each one of those folks who is counted in the percentages, you know, even nationwide, only 65% of people get counted. In the city of South Fulton, we're right around 60%, which is more than the state of Georgia's average, which shows that we're not getting the federal resources that we need. So it can be very tough for us.
Wow. I never really looked at it like that. Makes sense, though. It makes sense. Well, could you explain to us, how does the census affect your career personally?
Yeah, I think, you know, when you're in government work, you know, especially administration, whether you're dealing with cities, states, counties, or specific programs, it really impacts your ability to be successful. The city of South Fulton is Georgia's newest city. We are actually 90% African American, and the whole focus of the city was to receive better services. And so our elected officials are really a group of dynamic folks with big ideas, and our taxpayers, you know, our residents, are really visionaries in creating their own city so they have control over services. But it becomes really tough when you don't have the support from the federal government to help you repair bridges or pave roads, and those costs end up being passed on to our residents, and that becomes really difficult. And so, you know, as a young administrator myself, I think, you know, I've been successful in a variety of different places, including South Fulton, but it's much easier when you have the support, like I mentioned, for your firefighters, you know, to be able to add firefighters and the federal government take on that cost, or to be able to solve, you know, issues with bridges and roads that have existed for years and years. And so the census is really our biggest tool to be able to ensure we get the money we need. And personally, it helps me become more successful.
Okay.
Convince you,
So you say that again?
I said, we're going to convince you. The numbers don't lie. I tell you.
Well, this is my Well, this is what I have to say about that. I know you're saying that it helps us to continue to have those fundings for those programs, but we continue to experience budget cutting for different programs, even during the time that is in need. Like it used like and they'll just cut a budget because. So I guess it goes both ways. That's where the confusion.
Well, but I'll tell you, Shay, it's not actually cutting budgets based on just arbitrary numbers. So the federal government uses this thing called formula funding. That formula is your census. So if you're not counted, you're not a part of the formula. And so when it comes time to make cuts, the first cut are those who aren't counted. So it's people in communities that aren't counted, is roads and infrastructures or new highways don't come to your community. You know, you don't get funding for schools. That's why there's a big difference in the schools on the south side and the north side. Many times it's because their count is usually in the 70 and 80%, and our count is in around the 60%. And so when you look at that and you look at directly where the cuts are coming, it's always based on the formula, and the formula always comes back to the census.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Donald. I appreciate that. I would consider that, take that in consideration. All right, so the fourth question is for Mr. Langston Longley, principal of Scott Elementary. As a principal, how worried are you about the parents of Scott Elementary not completing the census?
To be honest with you, Shay, I'm very concerned. So being that my school is 90% African American, but even that other 10%, my Hispanic families, is really important. They're scared. They're afraid of that citizenship question. They're afraid of people coming to their homes and under our current administration, removing them, deporting people. So it's a big concern. So we're using, I don't want my community to fall victim to fear tactics to keep us without the resources that we need. And so that's really what the goal was. You can give people less if you can scare them out of answering the questions.
Well, like I've been asking them, how does their census affect your career personally? I'm going to ask you a little bit differently. Do you fear by them not filling out the census properly, does it create budget cuts in your school system?
I'm more than fear. I'm 100% sure. I got a number for you, Shay. 900 billion. So in 2016, the census funded 325 programs. That's $900 billion. And so when we're talking about not arbitrary programs, school lunch and breakfast, so that's directly, literally taking food out of the mouths of children. Or we're talking about things like special education, foster care, Section 8, Head Start. So when we look at all of those things on the everyday level, the kids that are going to miss meals at my school, we're lucky to have a 21st century grant that's federally funded. So my kids come to after school for free, receive a snack and a hot dinner. They have Saturday school and they have a summer program. So when we lose that, we lost last year, the kids don't have a place to go. So they're missing meals. They don't have a place to go. Parents, if school gets out at 2:30 and you get off work at 5, what is the parent supposed to do? Lose a job. So when you lose Title I funding for parents who are already earning lower wages, it's hard to get aid and you feel trapped. I can't work because my kids don't have anywhere to go. When we can give them an opportunity to have a safe space in the meal, that parent can work and can start to climb themselves out of low income situation.
Awesome. Makes sense. It makes sense. I could have another question, but we'll wait to the end on that one because COVID could definitely affect those fundings as well. But that's a whole nother question. All right. All right. So next up, we have this question is for Mr. Brad Johnson, town manager of Havana, Florida. Right. Given that Havana, Florida has a smaller population, how will your citizens benefit from participating in the census?
Good day, everyone. To answer that question, Shay, it's monumental. It's completely monumental that people get counted. The town of Havana has a little over 1,700 people there. The average median income is about $24,000 a year. The community is a great, cozy little town. However, we strive to grow, but you can only grow so far and so fast over so much period of a time. And in that time frame, as you look at the numbers that I just gave you, is how many people are living there, how much they're making. There are certain services that they're expected for their local government to provide to them, and their dollar only stretches so far. I think you probably heard local governments or your local leaders say before, and you mentioned this, Shay, when you start talking about, but I see budgets getting cut every day. We're already operating at a minimal when you start talking about smaller governments. So the way we're able to make things happen for our citizenry oftentimes isn't based off of our millage rate, off of the local property tax revenue that comes in to handle the myriad of services that are necessary: water, wastewater, fire service, police department. We get help from our government. We get help from the state and the federal government. And I mentioned the state because in many instances, like Ed was mentioning, in disaster recovery, state departments of emergency management are the subrecipient to the federal government. So all of these things are consistently tied to the census, making sure that the number is accurate. And that's why I'll tell you, throughout my career, I've been uniquely tied in several different positions of work that made me have to work close with the census and understand the importance of it. And now as a small town manager in a community that I love, where I wake up every day and my job is to make sure that Miss Mary, if she need her can pulled out, we pull it out by the curb, or is to make sure that if a limb falls on a power line and somebody needs to get to it, that we don't send a hard hat over there that takes several hours to get there, that if I got to get up there myself, I'll do it. And that's the type of community we have. Our resources are stretched thin. So we need our federal government to be able to provide, and we need the start of that conversation is the citizenry, it's the people. And the last thing I'll say, Ms. Shea, and I'm going to go ahead and say, because I'm like Odie, I'm going to make you a believer when this is over with. We've got citizens in our community that they'll pull up the front seat, right in front of me, not now because of COVID, but a lot of times they come by and they pull up and they want to talk and they're like, we need this. It always starts with we need. All right. And then they say, and we expect you to, provide these things, to do these things. That's why you're here. And my thing is this: I've been imploring and beseeching the people in my community and say, this is your time to do your part. You expect a lot of me, and I'm gonna live up to that. But this is the time for you to do your part. It's simple. 2 words: get counted.
All right, makes sense. Now, I do want to ask, do you fear that with budget cuts that the town would feel as though you're not doing your part to get them to what they need?
Well, that's the importance of transparency and being honest. I mean, we're in budget season right now. We're wrapping out the year, and I mean, I've had to make some tremendous cuts to our budget. But you have to be very forthright and honest about what those cuts means and what they are. And that's just a part of the business. It really is. I mean, in order for a community to receive a certain level of service that they expect, they've got to be willing to pay a certain amount. That's the same for all of us. And if the rubric for that service level changes by way of what you're paying or by way of state share and federal share resources that come down the pipe, then we've got to figure out how to make revenues and expenditures meet. And that's just a very realistic thing. I don't think it's a blame game. And I think those that make it a blame game are ones that don't articulate that clearly. For us as a fiscally constrained community, a small community, that's oftentimes not the problem, because we are the recipient of people doing the census. Look, it's easy for us to show it. It ain't but a few of us. Help us out, government. We need you, right? It's only a handful of us. Don't tell us no. So for us, it's not that hard. But I'll give you one example, and I hope I'm not taking on to the question you're about to ask. But we've got a $6 million wastewater treatment facility upgrade that's happening right now. That 80% of that money has come through the understanding of the size of our community and our inability to pay for it ourselves. We're paying about 20% of that back over a debt service of 30 years at 1%. And that's because we can't afford it, and the state and the federal government know that we cannot, based on our millage and our general revenue base alone. And that comes from us being tied into our citizenry and them telling us.
Got you. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for that. It makes sense in a sense. Okay. We getting somewhere. I don't know what y'all doing, people. But it's starting to make. But the people who would think negative would the people to be the ones that went and took the census. That's what I took from that. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm like, okay, it's the ones that's not signing up like they should. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sorry, you was gonna say something.
I was gonna say that's exactly what it is. Another side of it, I've had an opportunity to do. I worked on the local update of census addresses in the county. Alex, I'm sure y'all might know about that. That's kind of the foretaste of this what we're doing now. And I will tell you, working with our permitting departments to get those numbers in so that you all can start getting the process counted. That was fun, and that's something that helped. But in the process of doing that, you learn, and this is what we got to be honest about. Some people are hiding, and that's why we need you, Ed. That's why we need you, Alex. Some people are hiding. I learned that back in 18 when we were doing the Luca. So we got to shave. You can't hide either, and we got to make sure our citizenry doesn't hide.
I'm guilty. Look, I'm hiding. All right, I'm gonna come to the front. All right. Thank you so much for your feedback, Mr. Johnson. We appreciate that. All right. So the next one up is Mr. Phil Singleton from Singleton Consulting. All right. So from campaign trail to Congress, in what way do you feel politicians can play a bigger role in getting voters counted in the census?
I think, first off, thank you for having me. I think politicians play one of the biggest roles when it comes to the census. Really, an aspect of it controls their job and what communities they can actually represent. I think there's a bigger focus outside of it, because almost as if we want a politician to tell us what to do. Like, but the thing is, we barely listen to our parents or other folks, so why are we going to listen to a politician when it comes to being counted? But it kind of puts a self-responsibility back on the people. It's like you have to make yourself want to feel important. And it's kind of like going on Instagram or Facebook. It's about the likes and the shares. And if you're going to post to get the likes and the shares, then do the census to get the likes and the shares too, because you're going to like everything that comes to your community and you're going to share the success your community is having from that. So that kind of goes twofold. But I think it also comes down to self-responsibility. When we look at the, and I'm in Florida, I'm a Florida-based political for the most part. But when I'm just doing my background research on Georgia, looking at Atlanta specifically, and we talk about self-responsibility, let's go back and look at the June 9th presidential preference primary, where you had roughly 800,000, if we're talking about African Americans or Black folks, you had roughly 800,000 Blacks who actually voted in the state that is the Black Mecca of the world in some aspect. And it kind of makes you feel as if we're not going to show up in the record numbers of population that we are for a presidential preference primary, whether you're with Warren, Biden, Sanders, Kamala Harris, wherever, we have to kind of take that same responsibility of voting and with the census as well. And just getting into the numbers, when you get into it, you have to really look at, okay, where are we getting representation from? A major part of it is each congressional district houses roughly 700,000 people, roughly. Some of them are gerrymandered. The congressional district for the member I work with is roughly 280 miles, stretching from the north side, west side of Jacksonville, all the way west to Tallahassee, Gaston County, and representing Brad Johnson City as well. But it's just a fact of it encompasses so much. But when we're looking at a census and we're talking about being counted and being important, or it being important, we also have to look at the fact of politically the impact it's going to have. Now, specifically, let's look at Georgia. Let's look at Atlanta. You have Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, and Gwinnett counties, which are the top 4 most populous voting counties in the state. But when you get down to the brass tacks of it, we're looking at the census ends up not only having the resources allocated there, but you also end up having the congressional districts, the state legislative districts, the Senate districts, everything is drawn from that. Now, for those of you who don't know, the U.S. Senate seat is the only one where you only have 2 representatives from your state, where it doesn't matter what the districts look like. They represent the entire state, kind of like the governor. But when it comes to the census, your state assembly or the Georgia assembly or your state legislature is going to redraw these maps. But you have to take into account not only the fact of 700,000 people being compacted into a congressional district, but you have to look at the long-term benefit and what the negatives of that could be as well. And just real quick to throw it out there, you have in the city of Atlanta, I'm looking at roughly the hub of the Black Mecca in the South, at least. You have the congressional seat of former member John Lewis, rest in peace. You have Lucy McBeth, Barry Loudermilk, and David Scott. And I believe they all represent a good portion of Atlanta proper or Fulton County. Then you also have Hank Johnson, Rob Woodall, who's that? Jody Hick, who would all potentially be impacted. Now, if we're talking about redrawing these districts, something we need to think about, look at David Scott's district. It's very gerrymandered. You're talking about a district that goes Douglasville, Riverdale, Smyrna, South Fulton, and Stockbridge. Even though that district is pretty safe and pretty good, it's really gerrymandered outside the whole city of Atlanta just to make sure that Black representation is there. So if we do include, not to say don't do your census, but when you do your census, understand that we could either lose a congressional seat or we could gain one. Let's look at Lucy McBeth. She's in a district where I know that she won a solid 2 years. She's in there, but she has a fight because Republicans want to take that seat back. That seat alone is +6 Republican, meaning that there's a stronger likelihood that a Republican wins that seat over a Democrat anytime. And when you get down to what's that, Jody Hill seat, that's +15 Republican. Rob Woodall is +9 Republican. Lucy McBeth, is +8. And Loudermilk is +17. So when you're really looking at it, okay, if we redraw these districts, yes, we can add more population, but are we going to add more Republican seats or Democratic seats? With the Republican-led legislature, okay, how are they going to compact this? We could look at Cobb County, we could look at Fulton County. Fulton County by itself could be one congressional district. But if you make Fulton County a district by itself, John Lewis's seat, Lucy McBeth's seats, Loudermilk's seat, and David Scott's seat all get redrawn. So if they get redrawn, what's going to happen? What's going to get pushed out? And when you have the rural counties, they're only going to get packed in together. So what you're going to end up having is a district that may stretch from, let's say, I'm not going to say making Atlanta, but it could happen, where a district could stretch that far to be so rural and pack people in, and it'll be a whole new member. But it'll really throw things off politically, because people will either be merged into two different seats. Let's say you have a race, a primary against Lucy McBeth and David Scott. Now you have two great politicians who have to basically eliminate each other, because that's going to open up a Republican seat in South Georgia or North Georgia. So it's something that we strategically have to look at. So what you're going to find is that it really depends on what side of the political spectrum you're on. That's going to determine where you are with the census. Now, a lot of states that maybe flip states like Florida, they understand that more moderates are coming in. In Georgia, more, and I wouldn't even say Democrats, because a lot of the registered Black voters in Georgia are actually independent rather than Democrat. So when you end up looking at the political spectrum of who's actually in charge and drawing these maps, you have to really look at it like, okay, what's the long-term goal here? Is the long-term goal to get more persons of color in Congress or elected? Is it to, hey, let's redraw these districts and open up opportunities so that the person who's a mayor may run for state representative will run for Congress, so we can create a domino effect of young leadership coming in? Or is it a fact of getting resources? And I think everybody kind of would highlight the resources, but politically we have to look at it to say, hey, we're going to make decisions here today that are going to impact the next 20 years. And the other part of it, and I believe Mr. Reed said it earlier, I'm not too sure, the gentleman who was a teacher said that, you know, his students or Hispanic students or families were probably afraid to be counted. I believe it could have been Ovi. But another part of it is you have to understand that the census has no political backing at all. People, even though it's a scare tactic with the census, people cannot do their census and then get deported. Even though that's the underlying issue of what people may think, that's not happening. But I think the greater fear on why you'll have a lot of conservatives or Republicans not really pushing the narrative for the census to be done, and I hate to say it, is because it could be the fact of them losing grip on the main population. Now, if you look at the 2010 census, which I was lucky enough to be a part of in the state of Florida for the count, is the fact of, if you look at the Hispanic or Latino population, if they were roughly 30% in 2010, and let's say they jumped to 40, 45%, they're already on pace to outpace and be the #1 dominant force in America by 2040, 2050. I think that if these numbers become transparent, not only do people of color, us, the Black culture, end up taking maybe a step or two back, but at the same time, it'll put a greater synopsis or a greater message out there to the world to say, hey, there needs to be equal Hispanic representation, and overall white population representation, like, would not diminish but be affected. Sorry for saying so much, but that's what I had to throw in for that question.
Appreciate that. And I'm not sure if you guys heard me or not. I'm trying to keep up with the mic and mine part, so excuse me. What I was going to say is thank you so much, Mr. Singleton, for that. I know, being young, one of the key politicians are not really telling them what to do, and the younger generation, they don't know who to listen to right now. They're just out there fighting for rights, but don't even know who to vote for. So that is something I want to come back to, because we need more leadership for the youth right now. So I think, but it's okay. All right. So next up, we have attorney Ladre Gilbert from Gilbert Justice Center. All right. And what are some of the reasons why your clients said they would not participate in the census?
Hey, I've been waiting here patiently just to let you know that I'm an avid fan of Greenleaf, right? And just want to say how cool it is to actually have an opportunity to work on this project with you, and get it, be able to talk about this. Well, like Mr. Johnson, I'm from a very rural area. And so a lot of times my clients that come in, they aren't interested in participating in the census because we're so far removed, or seemingly in our minds, we're so far removed from government per se, that we just feel like back in the woods that we don't count. Now, however, we have had, it's not fortunately, but unfortunately, we've had two events that have arisen recently that have changed that dynamic. One of those being in 2018, Hurricane Michael. When Hurricane Michael came through, Hurricane Michael hit Jackson County, Florida, North Florida, like an atomic bomb. I mean, it was the strongest hurricane at that time recorded to ever make landfall in our area. And it basically turned our lives upside down. And it took us about a year and a half, 2 years of basically having court in coffee shops and pretty much all over the place where we could, until we were finally getting back in the courtroom and having some sense of normalcy. And then here comes COVID-19. And here we go again, trying to find a way to make this thing work. So I think that with those two events, they were wake-up calls to the people in our community that the federal government actually does care. The federal government is actually here. There are programs that are available to help people in these rural communities. Before, is particularly because we're largely an agricultural area, it was the farmers, right? Farmers that were receiving these benefits. Most of the employers in our area are either correctional facilities, healthcare facilities, or the school system. So, and then, that's a big part of why, people in our area just feel like they were not counted. However, it's been an unfortunate set of circumstances, but it's been those two events that have recently arisen that has basically renewed our people's sense of importance as it relates to the census.
Reason why it is, Attorney Gilbert, that is the reason why it's felt that way all over the world, just so you know, all over the US, okay? Just so you know, that we all feel that way, because I'm being honest, so, but great point. Let me ask you, could you tell us how the census might affect your career personally?
Right. And let me just piggyback off what I said. I get it. I certainly get everyone feels that they're not affected by the government, but that hits a little different when you're out in the middle of the woods. It hits a little different when you're living on dirt roads. So, I mean, not to discount anyone else's experience, but when you're back in the middle of what we seemingly call nowhere, it's a little different. Now, specifically to my career, it all comes down to dollar and cents, right? And then you're talking about the dispensing of justice. So someone having a state job that receives federal funds, or someone working for a federal entity, basically having someone that needs representation, they're going to either have to go through the public defender's office, or they're going to have to go through some other publicly funded attorney, as opposed to coming in and hiring a private attorney like myself, because they don't have the jobs because there have been budget cuts. Because Sunland and other entities in our area, assisted living facilities, their budgets are cut. Their budgets are continually slashed. You know, this governor we just had in the state of Florida was not a friend of state jobs or state wages, and he has decimated our economy down here in Florida because of his tactics and his policies. So you're basically talking about someone having an opportunity to come get a pretty decent lawyer like myself, or having to go with the public defender's office and putting their lives in the hands of. And now you're talking about a system that's it's just an extension of the good old boy system. There are some good public defenders in our area, but for the most part, you're just basically talking about somebody who's sitting around and drinking coffee and going to lunch and hanging out with the state attorney and the judge every day anyways. So someone's life and their livelihood and their freedom is actually at stake when it comes to the distribution of dollars and the distribution of commerce throughout our community.
Okay. Good point. Good point, you guys. Good point. Okay. I'm almost there. So right now, what I want to do is I want to open up the floor for everyone. I know Mr. Reed might have some questions for Mr. Singleton, or Mr. Donald might have something for Mr. Gilbert. I want to be able to have you guys open up freely, and we're just going to take a few questions and just maybe cross question each other and see, if we can, and I'll start actually. I want to talk to Mr. Lima. Know what is it that you actually do at the U.S. Census?
So I'm a partnership specialist with the 2020 census. So I'm basically a liaison. My job is to connect entities. I work with Ed Reed. I would work with Mr. Johnson. I would work with Mr. Gilbert. I would work with every person. I would work with you. I would ask you to share important information on your social media accounts. I'm working with the cities of Atlanta, East Point, College Park to bring awareness to the census, but again, in a way that it's digestible and understood. I think there's a lot of great information that was given today. And, my hope is that the people that are watching this, that it's sinking in on the value of completing the census, because not completing the census. So Shay, you're not a believer yet. We have more to lose than we do if we don't do the census. We have so much to gain by doing it. So budgets, programs, there's no conversation to be had if you're not there. If on paper you don't exist, we don't even have to run it through a formula. We don't even have to talk about, well, there's only X number of people there. There's no numbers there. So the numbers, they don't get the money. I'm sorry, the need doesn't get the money. The numbers get the money, because we always need. I'm going to shorten it up a little bit. I've been to 46 MLKs in this country, from New York to Cali to Chicago to Portland to Denver, 46. They all look the same, Shay. You know why? Because our people do not stand up and say, we're here. And since they don't stand, they all look the same. We could take pictures and you could be like, oh, that's my MLK off of Crenshaw. Oh no, that's my MLK off of Houston. Oh no, that's my MLK off of Grant Street. They all look the same. And things will not change for our communities unless we stand up and become visible by being counted in the 2020 census.
All right. Okay, makes sense. It makes sense. As long as we're being counted, that's what the people just want to know. Are we really, really being counted? All right. Anyone else want to take the floor and ask a question, or want to know anything else? Or
I don't have a question. Just more of a statement to kind of make it, I think, a little bit more plain as well in terms of the funding. There have been a number of estimates out there in terms of a per person amount that the state, the county, the city would lose per year if they're not counted. In Georgia, that number is estimated upwards of $3,600 per person. So that's per year. So one person is missed, not counted in the 2020 census. Over the span of 10 years, a decade, that's $36,000 that we're losing in terms of funding. So if we think about it in that aspect, to think about that's $36,000 from just one person. The Urban Institute estimated that in Georgia alone, there were upwards of 67,000 Black men who could go undercounted this year, and that was pre-COVID-19. So you know that math, I don't know what it is exactly, but it's over $200 and some million a year in terms of loss of funding, just off of that many Black men. So to Alex's point, you think about, you know, counting those 67,000 Black men, the difference that money would make in the communities in which we reside. And I think that's certainly a game changer in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of education and healthcare, and the things we're able to provide, not only for us that are on this, but for the next generation of people that continue to come up. Since we only get one shot every 10 years to make it happen, so you know we can't miss our shot. What's that Hamilton song? Y'all know the song. So this is our one shot to make it happen.
Okay. That's understandable. Like I said, with the fear that the people have in regards to filling out the census, you guys say that you keep saying funding and funding and funding, but I think part of the problem is that they're not seeing the difference. And to piggyback off what you were saying about MLK, you are absolutely right. Is every MLK is exactly the same. All right, so we're going to get to Attorney Attorney Gilbert. He had a question.
Thank you. Again, it's great to be among such a distinguished panel of guests. Don't know how I snuck in, but hey, I want to make it count that I'm here. I have a question for you, Shay. My question is for you. You say that you have your disdain or your disdain or your thoughts about the census. Where do those thoughts arise? I mean, what gives you pause about participating in the census?
The pause that it gives me is that, for one, I am one that have never used any of the government services, from state food stamps or anything. I'm gonna be honest with you. Me and my parents were strict about it. I did grow up in the hood. I'm not gonna lie. I actually, I just got past my doorstep, but we were not one to use those funding. So if we're not using those fundings, right, what does it matter to us that is needed in the community for us? And if we're looking at our next door neighbor who is actually using the funding and actually living at a lower poverty level than us, to us it's like, what does it matter? They're not helping them anyway. So I've seen this growing up. I continue to see budget cutting all my life. You know, I'll be telling my age if I give you the years, but you know, we're gonna leave that right there. But you know, it's just that every time I turn around, there's a budget cut. There's a budget cut in the funding in the Boys and Girls Club and I was one of the ones that went to the Boys and Girls Club. So if you constantly see budget cutting, but yet we're out here doing census report and trying to make everyone count, how is it making a difference?
Can I say something, Shane? Because I heard something that Odie said first not too long ago that like dials right into what you just said, which is, you know, when you start talking about budget cuts, like if you're the number that's not in, you're the first cut. You're not even a part of the equation. So I'll give you an example. Odie was talking about the foundation for how local governments get funded outside of whatever the, you know, state revenue, federal revenue sources, but it's the local taxpayer, the property tax appraisement, and they get paid through the millage rate, a multiplier on that property, and so that property, that's that person that owns that land, that square, that parcel, that box that somebody lives in. You take that box off the map, it doesn't exist. You can't. So we're not. Again, this goes back to, like I said, making revenues and making dollars make sense, making revenue and expenditure match. Like it starts with the lack of money coming in. That's where it starts. The lack of money coming in, and therefore you have to make it match what you're spending, and then it's a revolving door effect. So the people are not getting it because it's not coming in. And the equation then becomes, well, do I charge that person more?
I'll tell you a great example of that is I've worked in the District of Columbia and now the city of South Fulton, and there's a humongous difference in the level of resources that are available. And a big part of it is because what one city gets from the federal government versus another. When you look at the amount of people in the city of South Fulton, for example, we've got 100,000 people, very similar to, let's say, the city of Alpharetta. Same number of people, same number of homeowners, but the land values are different. Those values are not just because one is in the north and one is in the south. It's because of the infrastructure that's there. It's because of the support that they receive from other places. So when you look at schools, they're funded because the numbers in their schools looks like there are more people that are in those communities. In addition to that, when you look at the investment in roads and infrastructure, it's because of the travel that is projected to be on their road. So when you really look at why these funds go other places, it really is a part of a formula, and that formula is based on who's counting. And I would kind of add to that information to make it very simple. Whenever somebody doesn't want you to be a part of something or does not encourage you to be a part of something, when it comes to government and data, you better get involved very quickly. So when there's a lot of mystique around the census and there's only benefits and you don't hear a whole bunch of negative things of why not, and they're all mystical, I'd imagine it's because people don't want you to have access to those resources. When you think about voting, when you don't have a voice in something, then leaders get picked, and all you can do is complain about the decisions that they make. And so those areas that many times where your vote doesn't count or your numbers don't matter, well, if they didn't, why is there a formula for it? And why are we the only people that aren't involved? Sometimes at some point, you've got to ask that question.
If I could kind of hop in there too, I think Odie made a great point. But Deshae, you said something earlier about budget cuts, about doing the census, and you're always hearing about budget cuts. It's not necessarily the census that does the budget cuts; it's the economy. And even now, I think, and something I didn't say earlier, I know I was very long-winded. This is the perfect time for every person to do the census because COVID-19. We need to get an accurate count of people that we're here now. We need to understand the healthcare benefits and the impacts that this has had on us. But that's going to impact us the next 10 years. By 2030, we're going to forget what COVID-19 is. But now we need to at least be entrenched in it, because the issue is the budget cuts you hear about really are going to stretch up until 2023, 2024 from this pandemic. Our state alone is looking at $5 billion lost revenue, which is going to trickle into local governments, which may have to raise the millage rates to make up for those losses. So it's not going to be the census that causes the budget cuts. It's the fact on how we address this healthcare issue, which has slowed down businesses and put everything to a halt. So you will continue to hear that, but just kind of throwing it out there to educate not only you, but the entire panel and all the watchers, or everyone viewing, that is not just the census. It's not the census that does the budget cuts. It's the elected officials that have to make these decisions because of the economic impact that's happened or trickled down into their silos.
That makes sense, and I think that's why there's wondering, why do we have to do a census cut when do a census count when it doesn't even relate to that. So that's the point of what those who are not believers are trying to get answers from. Okay. Well, I thank you guys. I want to start just for time purposes. I want to just start getting with everyone's final thoughts. We're going to keep it to maybe one sentence if we can, due to time purposes. So I'm going to wrap this thing up. But I do appreciate every last one of you guys, your feedback, you guys sticking out there to really trying to work to bring the community together. I can see it. I can tell. And I will say this, whether I believe it or not, I'm going to trust you guys, and I'm going to fill out the census, bro. All right. So yeah, go ahead, clap for me. All right. So we're going to see if this thing works. Okay. I'm going to see if it works. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and with final thoughts. I guess we can go ahead and start. I see Mr. Lemmy, you want to go last. We'll go ahead and start with Mr. Reed.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Shay. Thank you to Emerging 100. Thank you to the panelists for participating, and thank you to those listening at home tonight. But I would say we got about 40 days now to ensure that our communities are counted. Georgia has a significant amount of work to do to get even to our 2010 level. And I know prior to COVID-19, we were trying to exceed that. Now I think we're just working to even meet that number. If all of the men and women on this call can commit, thank you, Shay, for willing to complete the census. But if we can commit to texting 10 people, calling 10 people to tell them, thinking about how that'll drive up our numbers and the impact. So thank you to all the brothers for the great work that you all continue to do in our communities. It's definitely needed.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Reed. And now I got to tell 10 people. I'm just kidding. You're next, Mr. Johnson.
No, I just want to say thank you. I've enjoyed thoroughly being on the call with everyone here. This is a big discussion, an important one. And I just want to say, Alex, Ed, y'all have been very great to listen to from y'all perspective. Y'all out there on the front lines for us, right? I think what y'all are doing is super important. And Ed, I need one of them shirts. I'm going to send you my address when I get off this call. I need that. And God bless you. Thank you, Ms. Shay, for moderating us as well.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson. And of course, Mr. Reed, I think he started something. It looked like we all want a shirt. I have a son. He is a vet, 21 years old, worked for the CDC. So I could place that on him too. And he's an advocate too as well. So all right, shirts. All right. Attorney Gilbert, you're up next.
Thank you so much to those that organized this call. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. To everybody that's on this call, you guys are rock stars. Continue to work hard in the community and make the difference that you are and the impact that you're making. I appreciate the fact that come on with Black men and see us like working and doing our things. Shay, you are a star, literally. Thank you so much for moderating this panel. And we just say like, no matter if you're in the middle of Manhattan or you're downtown LA or you're in the Red Hills of Alabama or North Florida, you count. So fill out the census and make sure that you're counted.
Thank you so much. All right, next we're gonna go with Mr. Singleton.
All right, thank you for putting this panel together. It was a pleasure being a part of it, Shay. Thank you for moderating. You've been amazing. My final thought would just be make sure that you're counted. I can't say it better than that. I think I said earlier, it has a greater impact, the resources, the congressional seats, the political seats at stake. So make sure that you have a stake in that.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. I'm definitely going to believe it or not. Mr. Lima, all right? I'm going to tell 10 people. All right, Mr. Longley. I don't want to mess everybody up. All right, there you go.
Definitely, I'm here. So, Shay, my final thoughts again. First and foremost, like everyone, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this panel, represent my community, and just get the word out. But to the people who are still skeptical, I understand. I get it. But when we don't count, I'm an elementary principal, so what that means is simple math. You say there's still budget cuts. What's 100% of nothing? And so, if you don't do the census, that's exactly you have to have a budget to get counted. So if you think it doesn't affect you, you ever went to school, if you ever went to the grocery store, you've come outside of your house, you have been a part of some of those funds. And so we're going to stand up. We're not taking it anymore. We're in a new day. So I appreciate it. But my plea is not to get people to do the census. It's to get them to make sure that they can get at least, I'll make you a deal. 5 people, Shay. 5 people. You don't have to tell 10. Just 5. And then we'll accept that from you.
I got you. I'm gonna fill it out. Seriously, I'm starting to. I'm listening. I'm definitely listening. All right, Mr. Donald.
Yeah, listen, I echo everyone else. Definitely thank you for the opportunity to spread the good word about not only the census, but how it impacts, the different communities that we all live and work in. I think my closing thoughts, though, are really you know, the easiest way to kind of demystify this stuff is to do your own research. And it's not always YouTube and social media, you know, their websites and books and documents and papers. And I think, you know, as we look closer, we have to make sure we're making the best decisions for our entire community. And so if we want our schools better, if we want our fire services better, if we want access to hospitals so we don't have to drive 20 and 30 miles for healthcare, you've got to make sure that you're counting. And so the biggest areas that negatively impact African American communities all come down to two things, and that's voting, the census, and I'd say a third thing, just in how we involve ourselves in the political process. And so I would encourage everyone to make sure they're focused on those three things for the betterment of your community.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Mr. Lima.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for putting this together. It's vitally important. If you haven't gotten that already, I'm going to leave you with an African proverb. It says, complete the task while the tool is in hand. The task is to ensure that our communities receive the funding and get the political representation necessary, not just for today, not just for tomorrow, for 10 years from now. I have a 4-year-old. I want him to have computers that work when he gets to school. So complete the task while the tool is in hand. The tool is the 2020 census. If you haven't done it, my2020census.gov. You can call 1-844-330-2020. If somebody comes and knocks on your door and you don't respond, they're going to leave you on the. You can go ahead and get it and fill it out yourself. They won't come back because you did it. Again, complete the task while the tool is in hand, the great equalizer in hand right now, the 2020 census. We only get a once in a decade opportunity. Shay, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That's it.
You know, that was a shot right there, but I'm going to take it. It's okay. Well, I thank you guys so much. I thank you, Jay, for having me. I appreciate it. I'm going to turn the floor back over to him. And I will say this in my closing and my final thoughts. I am going to fill out the U.S. Census account, okay? Not to say I am a believer. I will fill it out so I can count to see what results we can get, all right? And that will be my commitment to you guys, all right? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shay. We truly, truly, definitely appreciate all the hard work that everyone has put in for this event. We would like to thank everybody for tuning in. It was a great conversation, the candid conversation that we were looking for this discussion. Please be on the lookout for our upcoming events. We will be having on Saturday, August 22nd, the 2020 Virtual Scholarship Celebration. It will be online. To find out more information, please go to www.100southmetro.org. If you want to find out more about the census, please go on to census2020. Is it .com or .gov to the census experts on the phone on the call?
Census.gov.
There we go. Let's do census2020.gov. Again, we would like to thank everybody for coming in. We'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. We'd like to thank all the panelists. Can we give each other a round of applause, please? Everybody did great. Everybody did wonderful. We truly appreciate everybody being here. We truly appreciate everybody tuning in. Again, on behalf of the Emerging 100 South Metro Atlanta, the 100 Black Men of South Metro Atlanta, and the National Coalition of Black Women for the MECCA and Metro Atlanta chapter, we would like to say thank everybody for tuning in, and you all have a great night. Thank you.